I do think that humanizing of the B2B brand is highly, highly timely and something we should have been doing from the beginning. So I think really focusing on it now will elevate not just those companies, accounts, clients that we work with from a B2B perspective, but then also us as marketeers in that space. I do think you need to really define the swim lanes and the value chain, that interconnected value chain between brand, marketing, go-to-market, and sales. How do you work as one across a buying demand unit or target audience? Because another thing that I was reading the other day from LinkedIn showed that sales and marketing, the overlap between their target alignment around audiences was only 16%. So there's so much wastage because people operate in silos that you're actually never going to get the optimal outcomes because you're only focused on an overlap of 16% of target audience, which means that's 84% wastage in terms of targeting. I do think when we use AI, we need to make sure that we recognize that our buyers are using AI as well. And when our clients and customers use AI as a buying partner, as a researcher, the human experience becomes the biggest differentiator. And that's where we need to focus. What's the problem that you solve and how can you learn and understand exactly why you've been chosen by your current customers? So, no matter the size of your organization, if you have customers that you're able to speak to, I would start there and just really get a deep dive kind of focus group into what is it that made them choose you right now? And then think about how that reflects to the brand that you're putting out there. Is that something that you're doubling down on? Is it an opportunity that you could actually elevate?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest in the award-winning OnBase podcast series. I'm your host, Paul Gibson, and as you know, we always look for different hot topics to discuss, and today's no exception. I'm pleased to say I'm talking today with Kate Mackie, Global Marketing Lead at EY, and the topic we're discussing today, an interesting one, scaling brand resonance and humanizing B2B for GTM success. It's a really interesting topic. Kate, I'm excited to get into this with you. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So I always like to start before we get into the meat of the topic. Simple question, Kate. You've built a career, I think, at the intersection of brand and GTM strategy. So could you walk us through your journey and what led you to focus particularly on humanizing B2B marketing?
Yeah, so I started agency side out of university and did maybe 8-9 years there, moving through kind of large scale group agencies into digital and data, and worked across both B2C and B2B. And having those roles on both sides of the campus alongside being an advisor led me to think about the customer journey from a more human experience. So really thinking about who do we sell to and what are they buying and why, and what do they need to make the decision as they get close to a purchase. And I don't think, from having kind of done both sides and advised on both sides, that there's much difference when we're talking to people every day. And so I do think that humanizing of the B2B brand is highly, highly timely and something we should have been doing from the beginning. So I think really focusing on it now will elevate not just those companies, accounts, clients that we work with from a B2B perspective, but then also us as marketeers in that space. We do as good a job, a more valuable job in terms of the total revenue within the FTSE and similar is B2B, not B2C. And actually we should be really thinking about the power that we can wield in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's very timely. I mean, everyone's talking about AI and the removal of human from all of these interactions. So it'd be a really good topic that I'm sure the listeners are very interested in. So when you look back on what's already been an interesting career, what was the moment you realized that maybe the traditional separation between brand and demand was no longer effective in what we class as modern B2B?
I mean, I think it's a scale and a scope because both brand and demand are incredibly important to B2B. The traditional funnel, people throw rocks at it all the time, but I do think it's a really good way and a great framework of really thinking through what we need to do. And I think if we just play in the demand space, you're getting ever diminishing, ever decreasing circles of the 5% that are in the market. Whereas actually what we need to do is think about how we broaden the aperture at the top of the funnel through brand. To really enable those leads to be bigger, more enterprise level, more scaled as you get to the demand side. So for me, brand and demand are one and the same. It's just, are you talking to a mass market or to more of a targeted market, and how are you thinking from broad to narrow cast through that process? Because B2B trust is huge in B2B, and you can only really build that through having that trusted brand and the relationship at the right levels that then you can use to really elevate the conversation when you get into that buying cycle as well. So for me, it's a spectrum, and I just think dividing it creates yet another camp of folks that you need to play with in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have lots of discussions on base podcasts in the past, but also day to day around the importance of brand and the importance of trust. Because a lot of the stuff we do is around identifying those anonymous buying signals. But because we found an anonymous buying signal doesn't mean, hey, give that to sales. If they've never heard of you, they've never been to your website, don't know your brand, going out there and trying to sell to them is wrong, right? You need to get that trust and that awareness there long before. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I've had a couple of conflicting discussions with brand managers are around brand awareness is vital, but only in the companies you can sell to, right? If you've got a product that only works in the financial services market, where's the brand awareness benefit of getting someone like a French Connection clicking on an ad, going to your website, ending up in your pipeline? All good, positive signs, but they're false positives, really, because it's not someone you can ever sell to. So,
And I
yeah,
think
but
the
I think
biggest
brand
issue with
is,
that, and the biggest issue with targeting the wrong folk is that you're warming up the market for your competitors. So it's not even, if you look at your demand and supply side, you've got to make sure that wherever you are creating that demand, you have supply. Otherwise, it's wastage. Whether it's wastage to your point around, being unable to realize that sale because it's not a product that individual can buy. But also, if you don't have bench strength in that space, but you might have globally, it just means that you're warming up the market for your competitors. So you've got to be really targeted. Brand at a mass level still has to think about who is right to drive awareness with and who is right to resonate with. And I think you've got to be top of mind when buyers are looking at their biggest problems, and you've got to have that creative consistency to enable that kind of drumbeat through the ever longer buying cycles and the greater kind of buying demand units that we're seeing as well.
yeah. And when we touch on those longer buying cycles, because we're all seeing them now, on your past experiences, have they shaped your conviction that the brand salience is the key to navigating today's cycles, especially as we say, these cycles are getting longer and longer?
Yeah, so there's some LinkedIn research that showed that they'd moved from kind of 12 to 18 to 24 months on a buying cycle, and the individual kind of members of that buying unit have moved from 7 to 15 on average. So to keep those individuals, warm, as it were, through that 18-month process, even if they're not necessarily in the process itself, just takes a whole focus on the brand space, not just demand. You have to have that bigger, broader perspective, because you don't know that you don't have the names, you don't have the data of everybody in that demand unit, and neither are you going to see buying signals, because it's influence as much as it is an actual purchase decision that matters in that group. So I think we have to have individually focused and targeted awareness for the issues and needs that your product is trying to solve for that group. So I always look at it in terms of who is your primary audience and your secondary and tertiary audiences, because you can then think about, well, who's the actual person who's going to sign on the dotted line, and how do you convince them? It's very different to how you convince the influencer who is actually the tertiary user. And if you're thinking about something like an ERP, finance might be buying the ERP, but your sales teams are also going to be using the data. And so if there's dissonance rather than resonance at the brand level, you won't end up with that collegiate approach to the buying demand unit, which is what you need to drive the sale at the end of the day.
So we're saying that it's getting more complex and more crowded and more difficult. These enterprise sales cycles are taking longer, and the buying group is getting bigger and bigger. And you hit on a really interesting point, actually, because I'm in sales and there may be 3 or 4 people in that buying group that I will engage with. Brilliant. But there's half a dozen others that I never will, and probably they'll stay anonymous. So getting that brand awareness and making sure the messaging that I'm giving to the 3 or 4 contacts I've got is getting to all those other buyers in the group, whether they're just looking at stuff offline, coming to your website, whatever, is just as important. How do you think a human-centric brand strategy will help combat all of that complexity and the extended cycles, etc.?
Well, for me, it's finding the brand truth. What is it that you as a brand do? And what is it that you can really drive to that enables anybody in that buying demand unit or buying group to be able to look at you and see you as somebody that is trusted? So, are you trusted in delivering what they need? And it does come back a little bit to the, you never get fired for buying brand, whatever in your category. And so there is always that trusted kind of fear-free purchase, and you need to be in that space with those outside of the specific sales targets, which means I think about really building that humanized approach to the brand and enabling trust between you and that kind of bigger, broader mass. So the messaging has to be consistent. From a brand perspective, it's not about having matching luggage, I would say. It's about how do you make sure you've got a common narrative, common message, common purpose that is built through and recognizable as you start to look at how those pieces come together. So that if you're, down kind of really in the consideration space with the sales targets and you're giving them case studies and use cases and, really confirming that their decision is right, they have to be able to resonate and connect up to the conversation that might be more of a mass brand conversation at the top of the funnel with the broader buying demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that consistency is so important. I mean, I get sold to all day, every day, as much as I'm trying to sell to other people. And the thing that frustrates me most is you might get a really good conversation with a salesperson. They think that sounds really relevant. And they go to the website and it's saying something completely different. That's a frustrating thing. And it happens all the time, right? Brands is an interesting thing, right? Because a lot of leaders still see that as a fluffy concept. What do you do and what would you recommend doing to prove that brand resonance is really a hard driver of success in the GTM world and driving better revenues, etc.?
Well, I think first of all, it's brand and demand on the spectrum. So to me, it's a 2-horse race. It's long and short term targets and revenue, and long and short term growth. And I think you need to show runs on the board in the short term whilst you're also proving the long term. So really start to think about how you might use some of the tech that you've got, because everybody's got fantastic technology these days, to really show that A/B testing. Where are you showing creative consistency all the way through the funnel versus where aren't you? And show that actually the growth is greater and bigger with brand. But then also use metrics like excess share of voice. So you can really show that if you outspend your market share, you do grow and you grow consistently over time. So there's a whole host of really, depending on your category, depending on your budget, depending on your objectives, there's a load of different measurement metrics and processes and frameworks that can help you get there. It's just about, I think, making the conversation pertinent to your commercial leadership so that they can see the growth aligns to their objectives, because I think we often talk to each other in marketing speak and marketing language, which can really dilute what we're actually trying to say is that marketing's a revenue driver and a growth driver, and brand and marketing together are where you would need to hit that sweet spot, because that will help you be the growth lever for the firm or for the organization that you work in.
Yeah, and we think a lot about the demand gen side of it and finding those new opportunities. A lot of companies still overlook it's just as important for your existing customers, right? You've got new people coming into the business, you've got new products to sell. They've got the risk that they might be looking at competition. So keeping that brand trust and consistency and relevance is just as important for customers as well as new prospects, right?
And it's cheaper. If you can convert and expand the footprint within your current customers, you don't have to pay the acquisition costs. So really, I mean, if you're looking at your ideal customer profile, you should be looking at your full segmentation, where's the most valuable, but also where's the headroom to become the most valuable. And then, potentially that is where that's the lowest hanging fruit. That's where you should be going initially. And that could also be where you can prove the brand matters, because you can start to have conversations with your clients that talk to the brand questions that you might have, and really test some of that thinking that will help you then have the more broader commercial conversations with your executive committee or board or wherever you report.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good points. So we've emphasized consistency and all that sort of stuff. When you look back at maybe some of the projects you've been involved in, what's the biggest mistake you see companies make when they're trying to maintain a consistent human brand voice across all of their different GTM motions?
To me, it's where it's too consistent. It's not actually targeted. So, people think that it has to be cookie cutter exactly the same. Actually, the buyers need different things as different roles in that buying demand unit. Your procurement people need to see something that's more kind of features and benefits and facts and delivery. And then your salespeople need more of a kind of what's in it for me, what's it going to give me. And the business itself needs to see how you'll enable growth or how you'll deliver to the objectives that you've collectively agreed to deliver against. So I think having too consistent, where it's an expectation that everything must be exactly the same, starts to then lose what is human, the fact that we're all total individuals and need to be thought about in a slightly different way. So really, in the same way that you would think about your segmentation more holistically within a large scale enterprise level pursuit, I'd be thinking about what do the groups need and what do the teams need, so that you can nuance use case.
Yeah, and I think technology has eased a lot of that, right? So if you can identify when someone comes to your website that they're an enterprise level financial services company and probably in the C-suite or a marketer or something, you can make sure that they're seeing relevance there. And if you're delivering an ad, someone comes to the website, again, you know the industry, the size of the business, you can give them not so much generic, but you can give industry based or size of their business based or pain based stuff. That was always really difficult, right? Because the time and resource to build all those individual things. Now you can dynamically do that. I think it's allowing us to be much more personalized without having to go down and create something for each individual. So it's definitely the way to go, right?
And there's no excuse not to anymore. I mean, I remember years ago working through the development of assets when you're doing data driven kind of targeting, and you'd have 600 different pairs of trousers because of various things that you might need in an email base, and you just think all of that's been taken out. That's all automated, which means we can have those higher value conversations around targeting, around segmentation, around growth, which makes a bigger difference.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So this, I'm sure, is all making sense to the listeners. But if we talk about the fundamentals, how would you define the connection between brand, go-to-market, demand generation, and why is that alignment so critical right now? Do you think?
Well, I think partly because of the impact of technology, we can do more with less, and we're continually asked to do more with less. I mean, that is the one question that every single marketer has to deal with at the moment. And it means that, budgets are tighter. You do have to prove yourself more within B2B than B2C. There's less of a kind of expectation of large scale budget. So I do think you need to really define the swim lanes and the value chain, that interconnected value chain between brand, marketing, go-to-market, and sales. How do you work as one across a buying demand unit or target audience? Because another thing that I was reading the other day from LinkedIn showed that sales and marketing, the overlap between their target alignment around audiences was only 16%. So there's so much wastage because people operate in silos that you're actually never going to get the optimal outcomes because you're only focused on an overlap of 16% of target audience, which means that, that's 84% wastage in terms of targeting. So the more that you can see it as an interconnected value chain using that same audience data, really, leaning on your CDP and making sure that your CRM works so that you've got an understanding of buying signals that can flow all the way through that value chain, and really knowing how you hand off, how you interlock. I mean, to me, that's absolutely critical to then go back to the fundamentals of who are you targeting, what's the right message to the right people at the right time, and kind of play that all the way through from brand all the way through to sales.
Yeah. And as you say, technology is really helping it now because you can have that view of the people and what they're doing within your CRM, your marketing automation. But now you can see all that anonymous activity that's happening maybe on your website or maybe out there in the ether on B2B sites or whatever. Combining that all together gives you that true 360-degree approach, right? I'm sure many of the listeners, or some of the listeners, may be working at companies now that are struggling to humanize their brand. And so I suppose a good thing to focus on, what would you say the first step to maybe the most impactful steps they can take so they can start driving a bit more resonance in their target audience?
So the first step for me always has to be the customer. What is it that they want, that they need? What's the problem that you solve? And how can you learn and understand exactly why you've been chosen by your current customers? So, no matter the size of your organization, if you have customers that you're able to speak to, I would start there and just really get a deep dive kind of focus group into what is it that made them choose you right now. And then think about how that reflects to the brand that you're putting out there. Is that something that you're doubling down on? Is it an opportunity that you could actually elevate? And then, really thinking about those category entry points as well. So, have people come in the way you thought they would, or have they actually started using your product on a broader scale for different things? And actually then that can look at how you might segment into slightly different use cases or slightly different conversations around the way into a purchase conversation. And so I do think really honing in on what it is that is your kind of human insight that then can align to that brand truth that you can double down on and start to push forward.
Yeah. Makes sense. Good points there as well. We're always after instant results, right? That's the modern world we're living in, and sometimes proving effectiveness is becoming more vital but more difficult. So, how do you measure the success of brand salience, and what key metrics do you use that show you're not just making noise, but you're actually building a connection with someone?
And I think you can start to look at awareness, unprompted awareness, consideration, and how people are moving through that cycle. But again, speaking to your audiences, speaking to your focus groups, making sure that the resonance is exactly where you thought it was going to be, and testing and learning along the way, doing pre and post brand surveys so that you can check those creative executions have really landed the points that you were trying to, and just making sure that your social listening's on, you understand what people are saying about you as a brand, and then bringing that back into the fold. So it's a constant kind of learning cycle as you move forward, but doubling down on kind of the brand truth as the kind of central core, and then executing from that. Because then what you're doing is changing the execution, not necessarily changing the brand. So you're listening to the audience about how they feel, how that brand is resonating. Should cut that. How that brand is resonating, and how that then starts to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening is such an important thing. We are involved in lots of communities and you do listening, but we also have customer advisory boards. And that's not just is our messaging resonating. We actually use that for product development and things like that. What is it you need rather than what do we want to build for you? So I think that listening is a really key thing. Now, we've probably got marketing leaders listening to this today who maybe they would like to do all this, but they're struggling to get buy-in from sales, which often that sales and marketing alignment is a constant issue also, but maybe even from the C-suite, so that they can build long-term brand-led strategies. What advice would you give to those listeners?
Say with your exec and your business leaders, you need to really have a conversation with them to understand what their objectives are, and then to align how you start to report back to those objectives, and thinking about how you drive, long-term versus short-term reporting. Short-term reporting, absolutely, bottom of funnel, really easy. I say easy. Marketing influence revenue, or direct influence of revenue, and they're tracking around those. Brand is more difficult. There is more of a trust play. You do have to think about, it's a long-term goal, so it's going to be hard to prove in the short term. But you can show the pre and post. You can start to segment some of your audiences and really, carry out proof of concept, test campaigns. So depending on the size and scale of your market, you should be able to kind of ring fence space that you can show and prove that it works in a market where we layer in brand as well as demand, and can then drive growth at scale. And I think if you can then show that, that it's a risk-free approach to testing, and then move and expand where you can, but failing fast and then kind of implementing at scale is where I would go.
Yeah, and that's really important because if you don't get the buy-in from the C-suite and you don't get buy-in from sales, it's always. I've sat in so many customer meetings where you get the sales and marketing in the same room, and marketing are saying, "Aren't we great? We got 1,000 leads," and sales are saying, "Yeah, but 950 of them were irrelevant." And so you really do need to get that alignment, and then the C-suite have to support it. So I think it's a really important area to cover off.
We work really closely with our sales teams. Oh, no, we work really closely with our sales teams to make sure that they see us as complementary, not combative, so that we're actually working together on things. We're not trying to steal compensation metrics, or, there's nothing kind of, we're in it together. The more that we can drive, the more that they can then turn the pipeline into actual opportunities. So I do think having those conversations, having those really close relationships with your sales teams, building very clear interlocks and swim lanes helps, because it means that there's no misunderstanding that you're trying to take their role. Their role is hard enough. Our role is hard enough. Actually, together it's better. So making sure that you have those relationships in the right place, that isn't just reporting upwards, but also kind of holding hands around the problem as well, helps.
Yeah, and we see a lot of where marketing will just say to the salesperson, "Look, that account that you're interested in, we've just identified they're starting to show some buying signals. Don't know who we are, never been to our website, way too early to engage you yet, but just letting you know it's happening." And then, excuse me, they've come to your website. They've just seen this white paper. We're getting close now, just keeping you aware, and these are the buyers we think we should go after. And then saying, "Hey, this is the right time. They've engaged, they've done this, they're at this stage in our buyer journey, reach out to them." Sales start getting the confidence that what's going into their pipeline are opportunities that they can close, but they already get the trust and the awareness that's needed. So I think it's really important, but get it right. There's nothing better. And we always have this discussion. Account-based approaches are always seen as a marketing thing. ABM, it's marketing. It's not. It's a business-related thing. You're concentrating on the same accounts and being effective with shared messaging. It's really important.
And I think some of those buying signals can be so understanding those connected buying signals really helps when you're on both sides. So whether you're marketing or sales, what is it that is seen as a sales buying signal and what is seen as a marketing kind of prospecting signal, and how do they start to come together? So one of the things that we're always very keen to do is really work through that sales acceptance process together so that you understand why that 950 seem to be particularly rubbish, and what can you do in a different way that means, do you need to have some inside sales teams that are checking that those leads are actually pertinent to the sales teams? Again, it's back to your piece around, is it passing French connection through when they can't buy? And just making sure that you haven't given the wrong targets over that have been showing they're interested, but actually we can't drive supply side. So making sure you've got that connectivity through the kind of MQL to SQL process. And they understand that it's not you sending through everything. You are doing diligence to get to that, means that people start to respect what you're handing over. So, and having those conversations all the way through, as you point out, is absolutely brilliant and enables that transparency and that trust.
Yeah, and we all believe it's quality, not quantity, that matters. But if their pipeline is starting to better quality leads and they close more of them, that alignment is just a natural occurrence. So I think that all this makes sense, and I'm sure our listeners will believe in it all. Have you got an example of a B2B company, whether you name them or not, that has successfully humanized its brand and saw a direct impact on its not just its execution but also its revenue?
I would obviously talk about ourselves. So EY, we've humanized our brand. We are a purpose-led brand. We're humanized. We're all about shaping the future with confidence, and that matters at a human level. And the brand that the team have built over the last 10 years has enabled us to double our revenues. So we've done a great job as a B, M, and C team to really drive that forward and enable that growth from 25 to 50 billion in the last 10 years, which is no small part down to some of the brand stuff that we've done and really driving that humanized brand approach. But I would also call out ServiceNow. So their putting AI to work campaign with Idris Elba is brilliant. I mean, it's really taking a very technologically driven product or platform into something that's much more humanized and really talking about what it can do for you and why you as an individual should believe that product and platform can really enable you to get to where you need to get to in your journey around AI.
Excellent. Yeah, both really good examples. And we're in a market, both you and I, that's constantly changing and evolving, and now probably faster than ever. So what do you think the next evolution is in humanizing B2B? And what should ambitious marketers who want to get involved in it be preparing for?
I mean, I think when we look at the disruption that's happening, it's not only constant, but it's getting more transformed, more disruptive. And some of the stuff that we're talking about is that the current market is now in a navy state. So it's disruption has changed. It's non-linear, it's accelerated, it's volatile, and it's interconnected. So all of those kind of pieces are unusual. It used to be more linear and predictable than it is today. So that unpredictability and the interconnectedness of everything, where things can just knock into each other and have a huge knock-on effect, means that I personally think we need to go back to the fundamentals. Because whilst absolutely AI and tech will change our world and will change marketing in an increasingly accelerated way, I do think when we use AI, we need to make sure that we recognize that our buyers are using AI as well. And when they start to use AI at scale as a research partner, the human experience becomes the huge. When our clients and customers use AI as a buying partner, as a researcher, the human experience becomes the biggest differentiator, and that's where we need to focus.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is no doubt is with us now, and it's going to become a more and more part of what we do and how we work. But I think AI is also dangerous if you get it wrong. I mean, a lot of AI stuff. There's companies everywhere right now. A lot of them aren't relevant, and I think AI with relevance is important. And I've termed the phrase AI with the why is really important, because we hear so often, AI is driving like salespeople or SDRs to go after this account because we say so. And it's a black box environment that never actually tells you why to go after them or where they are on your buyer journey or even what the signals are. So you aimlessly go after this company and you don't know what messaging to use or what stage they're at. And so we're seeing a lot of, and it does affect sales and marketing alignment, where sales are going, I just don't trust your signals anymore. So that's AI without the why, right? If there's no why behind it, I think it's risky. But yeah, there's no AI is here to say. Do you see AI and brand having AI having a big effect on the brand side of things?
Yeah, and I think it's because your AI and why is my confident intelligence. So I kind of think about, yes, we've got artificial intelligence, but you still need to be confident with that intelligence. It can't just be, here's a plethora of stuff thrown at the wall, because that's just more spaghetti at the wall that we've always had. People telling you that this is a fantastic lead, and when it's not. So I think the AI and brand piece will mean that we can accelerate personalization at a pace we've never seen before. So back to the, how do you make sure you've got some segmentation within your creative? And I think that will be further up the funnel, so that we'll be able to personalize at scale, which is something that I know has been the holy grail for many years. But I also think that it means we can get greater feedback and greater on-the-fly targeting, which will help in terms of both media, but also the creative messaging that we know will resonate to particular audiences that might be, I don't know, finding advertising in various kind of native channels. And that kind of targeting will be able to be something that can happen, real time. And then the feedback from that will be able to optimize what happens further down your journey in real time as well. So I think it's even more important to make sure that you've got your segmentation properly set up. You understand exactly who your audiences are. You know what your industry messaging is. You know who your ICP are, so you can cut out those that aren't valuable. And really start to think about how AI becomes your execution partner, and you are the thought partner to that execution partner, so that you're confidently and intelligently driving both together.
Absolutely. And AI can take away all those mundane, time consuming tasks, that building lists and doing all this sort of stuff. And creative people can be creative, and marketers can market, and salespeople can just sell. So I think if we get it right, I think it's just going to benefit and ease all of us. You sound like someone who probably consumes lots of content. Is there a particular book or a blog or podcast you'd recommend our listeners look out for?
So I tend to err away from marketing content, which is terrible because I know we're on a marketing podcast, because I think you need to have thoughts, ideas outside of your kind of pure play kind of focus. And so things like Wired, where it brings marketing, science and tech together, are the areas that I prefer. I love, and I did a degree in the history and philosophy of science. And I started off with a chemistry degree and ended up in changing to the history and philosophy. So for me, it's more about thinking about what is that serendipitous global view, erring away from politics, and just thinking about what does science enable us to do? What does nature enable us to do? And how can we learn from that? And what is it? Behavioral intelligence is something that I'm also really interested in. But yeah, I generally have Wired and a number of kind of comedy shows, just to give the levity to the situation, because we're always so focused on the marketing piece. Actually trying to plan and have serendipitous thought around the edges is more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to be fun, right? Whatever we're doing, if it's not fun, there's no point doing it. I think those comedy ones are really good. I know you've recently launched your book. Tell us a bit about it.
So my book, handily on my desk, is B2B Marketing Fundamentals: Drive Impact Across Brand, Reputation, Relationships and Revenue. It's targeted very much at the early to mid-marketer, and gives you, as a B2B marketer, the legs to grow and the space to really think about how you can go from brand all the way through to revenue. And it's a practical guide with hints, tips and tricks to help you on your journey. So yeah, please do. It's available at all good booksellers. Please do buy if you're interested.
Awesome. Sounds like a good book. I'll definitely be checking it out myself. I think there's definitely an argument for a follow-up session, because I think we've only just scratched the surface in the time we've had today. So a cheeky ask, if I might, would you be able to share the names of any others people that you think we should bring on the show in the future?
Yeah. So I'm going to err on the side of 3 women, because there's an awful lot of men in marketing podcasts, and I see an awful lot of the same names all over the place when I start to listen to things. And I don't know how I say her name, because I've only ever read her books, but Jenny Aker, Aaker. She's a professor at Stanford in behavioral science, and how do you bring humor into business? And so she's an award-winning writer, New York Times bestseller, and has done some fantastic work around humor in business and behavioral science, and how you help that kind of conversation move forwards. I would also say an ex-colleague, Caroline Day, now leads the LinkedIn B2B Institute. And so she's very much in that space, on that, on that platform, working out what does that mean for a B2B audience. So I think she would be great. Somebody I spoke to the other day who is doing an awesome job in a very data-centric role is Denise Pearson, the CMO at Snowflake. who has driven immense growth through marketing and really got all of her commercial teams and more broad on side to enable that.
Awesome. Yeah, 3 guests that I'm pretty sure we haven't got on now. I would like to say, though, I think this year I've had more females than males on there. So I'm definitely doing my bit as much as I can.
Thank you.
I reckon we probably opened up lots of future questions and conversations with people who may have been listening to this. If you're happy to, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you after this podcast?
So I'm on LinkedIn and I manage my own LinkedIn, unlike many people. And so I am always open to conversation, to contacts, to connection points and to conversations. Yeah, reach out on LinkedIn, Kate Mackie. There are a few. I am not the scientist in Australia. I am at EY in marketing. So yeah, reach out.
Perfect. You very nearly could have been the scientist with your chemistry background, but
I could have been. And I met my husband in Australia, so who knows?
oh,
But
there you are.
not me.
Awesome. Well, listen, Kate, you've been a great guest. So thank you very much. A really interesting session. As I say, I think there's more to come from this. So if you're open to it, maybe we can have a follow-up session. In the meantime, thanks very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget, there's nearly 600 other episodes in the series, so check them out. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And until the next time, cheerio.